It's the Harman Kardon Neo versus the JBL GO 3. Now, I did a video of the Harman Kardon Neo versus the Bose SoundLink Micro and the Tribit Stormbox Micro. It became very apparent very early on that those speakers are in a different class to the Neo. The clue was, I didn't look at the specs, which says 3 watts. And there's your clue, 3 watts is even less than the spec of the JBL GO 3 at 4.2 watts. This is a speaker that I really like. It's a really dinky little speaker. I like the colours. I like the feel of it. And I mean, the only problem was, oh blimey, there was no bass. But blimey, when I heard the Harman Kardon Neo, I realised there's no bass and there's really no bass. But clearly, this is the comparison. Now, JBL, Harman Kardon, they're like brother and sister in a way, because that's the high end, they say. That's what they tell us. Harman Kardon is the high end of JBL. JBL's for the masses, people who've got a lot of money to spend, and all they want to know is, yeah, but has it got bass? And then Harman Kardon, you know what, we like the nuance in our music. I want to hear a bit of detail. I want it balanced. Well, that's Harman Kardon, isn't it? We're going to find out. So, very different form factors, other than they are both small. In terms of weight, 251 grams for the Harman Kardon Neo, 210 grams for the JBL GO 3. Got a bit more power, and it's actually a little bit lighter. The other thing about it is, this is clearly meant to go either on axis, but how much on axis? Because if you put that on a handlebar, on your bike, on your pram, it's doing that. It's not the most thought out strap I've ever seen. I figure it's meant to be played like that, so therefore I should record it and measure it at 45 degrees. Whereas you can't do that with the JBL GO 3. I'm going to show you why. I should have thought it through because I don't have my phone. I'm going to get my phone. So you turn on your speaker, you start playing your music. So that's fine if you want to take it for a walkie. But if you don't want to take it for walkies, you're going to have to play it like that, as it's got its little stand thing there, clearly meant to. Although I should point out, it's actually reducing the surface area it's in contact with. So actually, something flatter like that would have been better on the bottom and would have helped the bass a bit. But there you go. Different form, look very different, different form factors. Even the power is different. But £31 when I checked this morning, £35 for the JBL GO 3, very similar in price. So I guess you may well be asking yourself, which one of these speakers do I want? Both came out last year, both have small batteries, but of course not a lot of power, so that's not such an issue. However, 3.7 watt hours for the Harman Kardon Neo, 2.8 watt hours for the JBL GO 3. So technically, well, not even technically, it is a bigger battery in the Neo, and it has less power. So in theory, will last a bit longer. But a lot of it comes down to how much bass they're going to produce. Can't stereo pair either of them. The JBL and Harman Kardon at 30 odd quid. Can't come up with an idea of how to pair a pair of them in stereo. Absolutely missing a huge trick there, because a couple of these little dinky things in stereo could have been a game changer. Both have USB-C connections. Only the Harman Kardon Neo has an auxiliary input. Only the Harman Kardon Neo can be used as a phone speaker. They both will float in water. So both IPX7, indeed, actually, the GO 3 is IP67, which means, yes, 1 meter of water, 30 minutes, but also it's dust proof. But it will float, but not with the driver's side up, whereas that will float with the driver's side up. They both have a woofer and a passive radiator, and they're both okay. Well, I would say they're both okay. The JBL GO 3, 100 milliseconds, average 100 milliseconds, it's okay. You're going to see lip sync issues, but it's okay. Whereas, very, very good for YouTube at 33 milliseconds, incredibly good. I don't know how they managed it, but obviously it talks well with YouTube. Local files around 80 milliseconds, which is still okay, but not incredible like 33 milliseconds. I want to give you an idea of how they're going to sound against each other, how they measure in the frequency response measurement. Just remember, it doesn't translate into the real world. When you're playing all frequencies together, and these speakers all have, real-time limiters, they play around with the frequency So it's just an indicator of what could happen when you do a frequency response measurement.
Bear in mind, the Harman Kardon Neo measures at 45 degrees, the most likely listening scenario, whereas the JBL GO 3 measured on axis because clearly designed to be listened to on axis. It's going to slant these measurements, but when in their most likely listening scenario, you can see JBL GO 3, big peak at 10 kilohertz, going to help with the clarity on this little speaker. Has a rounded bass. There's some attempt, albeit it's upper bass. But I say that because the Harman Kardon Neo, there's no attempt at all to hold on to even upper bass. It does measure very flat when listened to or measured at 45 degrees. But the GO 3 at maximum volume looks like it's going to be possibly clearer.
So, bass lovers of the world, look away now. These are not for you. I mean, these are really not for you. If you've got any sense of listening out for bass, these both are bass light speakers. Now, the other thing is, when I test them, as I said, clearly meant to go on axis like that because it goes walkies otherwise. Whereas I think the fairest thing with the Harman Kardon, in terms of, what you're going to hear when you're listening, it's most likely to be at 45 degrees, but you can play it on axis, bear that in mind. So for my 75% volume test, I'm volume matching them, but bear in mind, that's recorded on axis because I'm trying to replicate what you're likely to do when you're listening to it. 45 degrees for the Neo.
Hasta que me convierta en rayos y más allá, a través de la gran oscuridad y más
I really don't know what happened with Harman Kardon when it came to, in my theory, and I'm not. It's not even a joke. I think someone found an enclosure, and they thought rather than throw the enclosure away, what can we do with it? And they found the cheapest driver they could do. A passive radiator, maybe it's not even working. I don't know. And then they didn't even think to. Well, hang on. our other company, which is supposed to be the low-end company, JBL, the Go 3, at least we should sound a little bit better. And look, technically you could say Harman Kardon is better. Why? Because 300 hertz up, very linear, measured 45 degrees on. Audiophiles will say, oh, lovely, we want a nice neutral sound. But the problem is it's a very small speaker. And when you have a neutral sound, it's normally because it's going to take advantage of the room acoustics. Of course, this speaker is never going to do that. It's not going to go loud enough. It's pointing up at the ceiling most likely anyway. It's not like having a hi-fi speaker and then saying, yes, neutral is what we want. And that's where JBL got it right, because I have that massive big 10 kilohertz peak, which works well. A speaker like that, it adds to the clarity. And anyway, it sounds like it's got more body and it has a tad more bass. It does have a tad more bass. There you go. Stop. Right. Okay. Right. That did sound quite bass heavy, didn't it? It has more bass than the Harman Kardon Neo. I don't know what that's been targeted at on my 75% volume listening test anyway. So we're going to have to go maximum volume. Now, for maximum volume, I will record them both on axis. Let's be fair. Let's get everything we can out of them. You will hear them at their loudest when you're listening to them both on axis. However, it means Harman Kardon can't take advantage of being on the surface and getting some more bass out of it. But I think that's the first way to do the loud volume test. I am also, for the sake of keeping it real, I'm going to throw in the Tribit Stormbox Micro because it costs 40 quid. Let me get it. It costs 40 quid. I think just to show where these speakers could have gone if they'd had a look at what else was out there, just to keep it real rather than just one against the other. Maximum volume, these two speakers, and the £40 Tribit Stormbox Micro.
Waiting for the sun to shine. Another lonely morning, another hopeless night. I still wake up each morning waiting for the sun to shine. Should have done this differently. Should have seen this coming so clearly. Would have given everything to make this right. I'm left behind here waiting. Should have done this differently. Should have done this differently. Should have done this differently. I'm still searching, I'm here waiting. Trapped in this cycle, all this happens every time. I still wake up each morning waiting for the sun to shine. Another lonely morning, another hopeless night. I still wake up each morning waiting for the sun to shine. If I could find my way to the light, I'd chase the sun. There's no way I'm still waiting, and I would fight these thoughts in my mind. Oh, I would run. There's no way I'm still waiting. Trapped in a cycle, this happens every time. I still wake up each morning waiting for the sun to shine. Another lonely morning, another hopeless night. I still wake up each morning waiting for the sun to shine.
So the Go 3 versus the Harman Kardon Neo. If I measure them both now on axis, to be fair, when it comes to maximum volume, it's going to sound louder when you're listening on axis. The JBL Go 3 still goes louder, minus 14.3. There's a decibel and a half up on the Harman Kardon Neo, which you'd probably be listening 45 degrees, as it looks like it's designed to lay flat. The JBL Go 3, that little thing, still holds on to more bass by 5 dB, if we can call it bass now, 85 hertz. And that 10 kilohertz peak helps to push through some clarity. So JBL Go 3 goes louder, holds on to so-called deeper bass. It's not the greatest day ever for the Harman Kardon Neo when it can't really compete against JBL Go 3. And then, just to give some perspective, we stick in the Tribit Stormbox Micro. We're going noticeably louder, but the story is you've now got a bass, 85 hertz, with 14 decibels up on the Neo, with 9 decibels up on the Go 3. 3 decibels is roughly doubling of power. We're talking the difference between no bass Go 3, no bass the Neo. We've got bass and we're going louder. on the Stormbox Micro for around the same price. And that's the point. Around the same price, around the same size.
So even at maximum volume, I think the JBL Go 3 holds on to a little bit more bass, if you can call it bass at these volumes, than the Harman Kardon Neo. Even when they're both on axis, we're being fair to both. Everything is equal. It even now sounds dull. You know, it's all right having a neutral sounding speaker, but when it's that rolled off and never had bass to start with, then can't take advantage of the surface. That 10 kilohertz peak on the JBL Go 3 is helping to give it a little bit more of a dynamic sound, helping the clarity. It's got a bit more. It just sounds better. That sounds dull. That sounds better. However, in the real world, what you can do at £40, a speaker that weighs not much more. I haven't got it right in front of me, but I think it's about 100 grams more. They're basically all micro speakers. Got a better form factor. You can take the strap off. It's much more usable because you can attach it firmly to a surface or a handlebar as you're likely to use it. And it's just better thought out. So the JBL Go 3 would be fine if you would have to go to then 80 quid for something like the Bose SoundLink Micro, but you don't. You've got 40 quid. It goes louder, it's got more bass, it sounds clearer, it still sounds more dynamic, it's got a better form factor. What's not to like? So, Harman Kardon Neo versus the JBL Go 3. Yeah, the JBL Go 3 wins, but hang on. Do yourself a favour, get the Stormbox Micro instead. That's been my review, or my overview, my comparison, and I thank you for watching.